On this 2011 to 2022 F250 Superduty with the 6.2 gas engine, P0455 means the EVAP system may be seeing a large leak or a condition where the system cannot seal the way the PCM expects. The truck may only have a check engine light. It can often run normally, and there may be a fuel odor depending on where the concern is. Broadly, think possible filler cap or capless filler sealing trouble, damaged filler or tank hardware, vapor line issues, purge control issues, or FTP feedback that does not match the test condition. Before disconnecting any fuel tubes or fuel system components, relieve fuel system pressure. Fuel can remain under high pressure even with the engine off. Also, treat fuel handling seriously and be ready for spillage around hot parts or ignition sources. Start with the available scan tool EVAP leak test for the vehicle. If the scan tool has the EVAP leak routine, run it first. If the test passes or fails with P0455, either way, continue into the P0455 diagnostic path instead of stopping there. If other EVAP codes are present, check what they mean first so you stay on the correct branch. Next, inspect the fuel tank, filler pipe, fill cap or capless area, and the EVAP system for wrong connections or obvious damage. Then run the scan tool canister purge valve check when it is available. If you find a concern here, repair it as necessary. Clear the PCM codes, repeat the self-test, and run the applicable EVAP leak test. If that visual check does not show a concern for P0455, move into the filler sealing checks. If the code routing points to the EVAP canister vent control circuit instead of the P0455 leak branch, handle that branch separately before continuing. With the ignition off, disconnect the EVAP canister vent valve connector and measure voltage between VPWR pin 1 and CAN-V pin 2 at that connector. Then, turn the ignition on, access the PCM controls, and command the EVAP CV status PID on and off. If the voltage changes with the command, turn the ignition off and measure vent valve resistance between VPWR pin 1 component side and CAN-V pin 2 component side. The decision point is whether the resistance is between 40 ohms to 70 ohms. If it is in that range, the concern is not duplicated on that branch. Pause and avoid guessing before moving farther away from the P0455 leak path. If resistance is outside that range, install a new EVAP canister vent valve, run the applicable EVAP leak test, clear the PCM codes, and repeat the self-test. If the commanded voltage doesn't change, check VPWR voltage at pin 1 of the vent valve connector. It has to be greater than 10.5 volts to keep going. If it is not, repair the open circuit, clear the codes, and repeat the self-test. With the ignition off and the PCM disconnected, check CAN-V circuit resistance between CAN-V pin 2 at the vent valve connector and CAN-V pin B34 at the PCM connector. Less than 5 ohms keeps you moving, otherwise repair the open circuit. Then check CAN-V resistance to ground at pin 2. Greater than 10,000 ohms keeps you moving, otherwise repair the short circuit. Finally, with the ignition on, check CAN-V pin 2 for a short to voltage. Any voltage present means repair the short circuit. If no voltage is present, that branch moves to connector and PCM operation checks later. At the filler area, do not disturb it at first. On a capped system, look for a missing, loose, or damaged cap, and make sure the tether is not preventing proper seating. On a capless system, inspect the inlet for sealing debris or damage. Use the supplemental fueling adapter 5 times to help clear debris from the seal. Then run the purge check if it is available. Do not use a soap solution around the cap or capless inlet, and do not use a hydrocarbon analyzer to try to prove the EVAP leak here. If there is a concern, repair it as necessary. Use the smoke machine Phase 1 leak verification pressure test to verify the repair. Then continue into the leak test hookup. If there is no concern, keep moving down the system. With the ignition off, inspect for a restricted vacuum hose between the purge valve and the intake manifold, a restricted fuel vapor tube between the purge valve and the leak detection control module if equipped, a damaged filler pipe, and a damaged fuel tank. If anything is found, repair it as necessary. Verify with the smoke machine Phase 1 leak verification pressure test, and continue to the leak test hookup. If nothing is found on the 6.2-liter path, check the FTP sensor baseline next. Open the tank to atmosphere for the FTP check. On a capless filler, install the supplemental refueling adapter. On the capped system, remove the fuel filler cap, turn the ignition on, and watch the FTP voltage PID. The expected range here is between 2.1 volts and 2.9 volts. If it is in range, go on to the purge flow check. If it is outside that range, install a new FTP sensor, repeat the test and verify the result. Then use the smoke machine phase 1 leak verification pressure test before continuing. Turn the ignition off, reinstall the fuel filler cap, or remove the supplemental refueling adapter. Then start the engine. Close the EVAP canister vent valve by commanding the EVAP CV PID on at 100% duty cycle. While watching the FTP voltage PID, incrementally command the EVAP CP PID to 100%. If the FTP PID drops, the engine RPM changes, or the engine stalls, that shows the purge valve is opening, so continue to the leak test hookup. If none of that happens, install a new EVAP canister purge valve, repeat the test, and verify the result. Then run phase 1 leak verification before continuing. With the ignition off, connect the evaporative emission leak detector with onboard nitrogen generator 218-522C or equivalent. Disconnect the fuel vapor to EVAP canister line at the purge valve. Then connect a suitable hose adapter to that fuel vapor line connection. When using this leak detector, the fuel level in the fuel tank must be less than 85% full. Also remember that smoke and airflow from this equipment will not pass through liquid fuel, and liquid fuel may be sitting in the filler pipe. If the hookup cannot be completed, pause and use the leak detector maker's setup information rather than guessing. For leak detection, remove the fuel filler cap or install the supplemental refueling adapter. Connect the supply hose to the hose adapter and set the leak detector to smoke. Turn the ignition on and close the EVAP canister vent valve by commanding EVAP CV on at 100% duty cycle. Start the smoke supply, make sure your hookup is not leaking, and manage the vent command if smoke does not exit the filler pipe. Once smoke exits, reinstall the cap or remove the adapter, keep applying smoke, and use a halogen spotlight along the EVAP path to find smoke leaving at the leak. If you find the leak, repair as necessary, reconnect anything you disconnected, run the applicable EVAP leak test, clear the PCM codes, and repeat the self-test. If you do not find a leak, reconnect the system and move to the phase 1 pressure verification test. Keep in mind that smoke under pressure may not reach a leak between the filler check valve and the cap or capless inlet, so if no smoke is found, visually inspect that filler area again. For PH1 leak verification, calibrate the flow meter using the 0.020 standard. Connect the supply hose to the vehicle through the adapter and set the leak detector to the 0.020 standard. Turn the ignition on, close the EVAP canister vent valve by commanding EVAP CV on at 100% duty cycle. Start the pressure supply and let the flow meter ball stop descending. Compare the measurement to the red pointer flag. If the system fails this pressure test, go back to smoke leak detection. If it passes and P0455 is the code you are chasing, continue to the purge valve leak test. For P0455, after the EVAP system passes the pressure test, check the canister purge valve for leakage. Use the scan tool purge valve check when it is available. If that routine is not available, remove the purge valve, connect a suitable hose adapter at the fuel vapor to EVAP canister connection. Connect the supply hose, start the pressure supply, and wait until the flow meter ball stops descending. Compare that reading to the red pointer flag. If the purge valve passes the leak verification test, there are no concerns present at this time. Clear the PCM codes and repeat the self-test. If it does not pass, install a new EVAP canister purge valve, run the applicable EVAP leak test, clear the PCM codes, and repeat the self-test. Only on that separate vent control branch, if the circuit tests lead all the way to the control module check, disconnect all PCM connectors, inspect for pushed-out pins and corrosion, reconnect every PCM connector, and make sure they seat correctly. Then, verify whether the concern is still present. If it is still present, install a new powertrain control module and complete the required programming. If the concern is gone, the system is operating correctly at that time, and the issue may have been a loose or corroded connector. The key with P0455 is to prove whether the system is leaking, whether the filler area is sealing, whether the FTP signal makes sense, and whether the purge valve can actually seal after the rest of the system passes. Do the checks in order and verify the repair before calling it fixed. For more diagnostic training, visit stepdiagnostics.com.